what's Egypt got to do with it? And just a little bit of review. It was the most fertile. It was the most spiritual. And you remember this, there's Osiris and there's Set. And there's this is the edge. This is a canal here. This is not the Nile River. But the fertility goes right up, boom, done. And then you have this intense Sahara wilderness. It's dramatic. I love bringing people into here. One time we were at Deir el-Medina, which is by Luxor. It's on the West Bank. And Deir el-Medina is the workers' camp. The workers who would dig the tombs for the pharaohs in the New Kingdom period in a place called Valley of the Kings. And we were leaving Ramses II's mortuary temple, and we got on the bus. It was like 120 or something like that. I figure once it's 110, it's just more hot. And then when you start using numbers, you're bragging. So it was just really hot. And I had a bunch of Canadians on the bus. I'm a Canadian, but I'm an American Canadian, as it were. So I'm a little bit more used to the warmth than they were. They were kind of sissy Canadians. So they're on the bus, and they're in air conditioning because we just spent time teaching at the temple. And I'm just a little frustrated because nobody's really crabby yet. So I say, okay, stop the bus. And I got Yasser to stop. Why, George? I want to walk to Deir el-Medina. Are you kidding? Do you know how hot it is out there? I know. But the Israelites were here when it was hot. We're going to be here when it's hot. And so we get out and we walk. That desert, if you've been in Israel, I'm sorry. There's nothing like it in Israel. There's nothing like it in Israel. You go in that desert, you die. You go in that desert, you die. No question about it. That's why Set is over there. He's a wild desert deity. People die there. Anyhow, we had those two, and we have there's my friend. There's my friend. I love that. And you know what I love about that picture? It's not the picture that a lot of people think of Muslims, right? That guy, some of the dearest people. And in the last year or so, 2 years, up until this year, I've been hearing more and more stories of Muslims having visions and not knowing what to do with the visions, and they find a Christian friend only to discover that the vision is Jesus. And they're passionately seeking God. And God is moving. God is moving in ways in China, the persecuted church in Jordan. But I'm getting off track. So I just love this picture because they're just having fun. Hey, look at that. But Egypt, with all of its riches, Egypt is a paradigm of fear. It had more wealth, more fertility, more deities. And it was a paradigm of fear. On the trip, there's when we're in Luxor, we'll go and we'll find. Let me back up just a little bit. We'll find a field like this, a dark with the dirt where you can see. I'll get them walking into the field, and we'll talk to them about. I'll say, well, now all of the silt has been deposited by the Nile over the millennia. So it's brought by water. So I really don't know how one part of Egypt could be more fertile than another part of Egypt. Okay? The soil isn't like in Ohio or in Ontario, deposited by glaciers or anything. No, it's deposited by the silt of the Nile. So how can one? So anyhow, we go to a field, and I say that because Goshen. Where is Goshen? Okay, biblical Goshen. And there's a place where they say traditionally where Goshen is. Now we get to the Hebrew thing a little bit, and in Hebrew, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but in Hebrew there's no capital letters. Capital letters are a big deal, okay? A capital letter, I like to use this one. If I say Jack with a small letter, it would be something I use to change a tire. If I'd say Jack with a capital letter, it might be somebody's husband. Okay, there's a big difference. Capital letters do big things. Okay, so but in Hebrew there's no capital letter. So the Bible says that Pharaoh gave them the land of Goshen the most fertile land in all of Egypt. Okay, well, now it doesn't have a capital letter. Now the question is, what does Goshen mean? And I'm telling you, it blew me away. It blew me away. And I hesitate to do it here because you're not going to be impacted as if you were there. But I'm telling you that we stand in this field, and I have them pick up that dirt. And I tell them, you know, if you pour water on sand, you get wet sand. If you pour water on this dirt, it becomes some of the most fertile soil in all of God's creation. And I pour some water on it. It's beautiful. I grew up on a farm, my dairy farm. I understand that a little bit. And this farm, and I said, it's unbelievable. God brought him to the land of Goshen, the most fertile of all. And you know what Goshen means? Goshen means draw near. Goshen means draw near. And the question for God's people all the time has been, because we're in the land of plenty, the question's always been, what are you going to draw near to? Are you going to draw near to the land? Are you going to draw near to the thing that God gave you? Or are you going to draw near to God? Are you going to draw near to the blessing? Or are you going to draw near to the one who blesses? And here's how you can tell. If you draw near to the blessing, you live in fear, for fear of losing the blessing. If you draw near to God, you live in faith, because whether the Lord gives or the Lord takes, blessed be the name of the Lord. The Egyptians, Egypt is just another word for fear. Pharaoh was afraid of the slaves because how many there were. Pharaoh's afraid. The Egyptians were afraid. They're nothing but fear. One of the reasons why God says you must never go back to Egypt again is God says, I don't want you to live lives of fear. One of the foundational teachings, in my opinion, one of the foundational things that you and I, that God calls us to embrace, to understand, is that we are not to live lives of fear. Now, when I say that, there's fear, like the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, by the way, this really, I don't know if you've ever studied this, but the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. This fear of the Lord is also not the beginning of wisdom, but also the fear of the Lord adds to life, says the proverb writer. The fear of the Lord is the fountain of life. The fear of the Lord is better than great wealth with turmoil. The fear of the Lord brings wealth and honor to life. Why did I put that one there? Oh, yeah. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, a netzer, from his roots, a branch will bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the spirit of counsel and spirit of power, and the spirit of knowledge and the spirit of the fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. There's fear. Now, this fear is the fear that is respect. This is the fear, a respect of the Lord, a respect of things that causes you to draw closer to them. Then there's the fear that there's fear, and then there's fear. And this fear is the fear of terror. That's the fear I'm talking about. This is Adam, the man. I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked. That's Egypt fear. That's Egypt fear. Now, it's interesting to me, and we didn't really plunge too much into this, but the last time I was here, we talked a lot about tabernacles. But it's interesting to me that God puts the Hebrews in Egypt. Why Egypt? Well, Egypt happened to be the most spiritual land. They had more deities, more gods. They loved their gods with all their heart, all their soul, all their strength. And I think one of the reasons why God put his people there, because he's a rabbi. So God puts his people there and says, you see what that is? You see how they are? Now I want you to love me that way. I think that God puts his people in Egypt where it's a land of slavery. And he allows them to become slaves because he knows he's going to bring them into a land where they're going to own slaves. How are they going to treat there's going to be a time when you work for others, but there could be a time when others work for you. And what's that going to look like? What's that going to look like? I think he brings them into the land where fear is so rampant because God wants to build people of faith, in my opinion. So let's do this. Let's open up our Bibles one more time. And hold on, let me just back up. Let's open up our Bibles to Matthew. And I was thinking about this. What picture do I want to go to that would be this fear picture, where fear is something that's dealt with? And so what I thought is I would go to Matthew chapter 8. Come with me there. Verses 23 to 27. And if you've got an NIV like I do, the translators have wonderfully put a little heading, Jesus calms the storm. It's a story of fear. Okay? So let me read the story for you. Now, this story is kind of important because it's repeated in other gospels. But whenever you have a story repeated in other gospels, don't try to make them all say the same thing. See, the reason we have 4 gospels, in my opinion, one of the reasons, and we used to try to harmonize the gospels. That's not helpful. What the gospel writers are doing is see, what you see depends a lot on where you stand. So if I got Josh to describe this room, he would say, well, George, there's a wonderful mural behind you with pyramids. I says, you got to be kidding. No, what I see in this room is a screen that's black with some lines on it, and that's it. Oh, no, George, there's a cup, and there's under the fig tree. I said, are you kidding me? No. See, we're both looking in the same room. We're seeing different things because we're standing at different positions. Okay? And then it would be good for every once in a while to say, yeah, but if you just turn around, oh, yeah. So the gospel, but each gospel writer wants to communicate something, and Matthew is communicating something unique from the other accounts of this story. And I want to unpackage that. I want to get some scuba gear on, and let's go diving, okay? So here we go. Matthew 8, Jesus calms the storm. Let's read through it, and then we'll kind of study it. Then he got into a boat, and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. Well, the disciples went over to him, but the disciples went and woke him and saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, you have little faith. Why are you so afraid? And then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves. It was completely calm. And the men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him, or shema him. I know it's Greek, but they hear him. Even the winds and the waves. All right, so let's begin. The story starts off with Jesus. Good start. Good start. Now, I just want to remind you of our background. God brought his people into Egypt. Egypt is fear. Egypt is fear because they're afraid of losing their blessing. They're not drawing near to the blesser. I bring you to a story that is a story of fear, of people who are terribly afraid, and they're not drawing close to the blesser. Okay? So our story starts off with Jesus. The next thing in our story is that Jesus got into a boat. Now, let me just tell you some obvious things, but they may season in you a little bit. Jesus, by trade, is a tekton in Greek. A tekton is a builder. Sometimes it's translated as a carpenter. and certainly builders would use wood. But in the Galilee, the chief building material is limestone. So it's probably a stonemason. Sorry for you woodworkers, but Jesus is a tecton. He's a builder, okay? But he's going into a boat, okay? This is something builders don't often use, okay? So he's going into a boat, all right? So then he got into his boat, and the disciples, here's the boat. So, Joe, you take your people to Nafgiddasar, and they found, from the first Jewish revolt apparently, the Romans brought some boats over the hills and through the valleys and put them on the Sea of Galilee. They had a great naval battle there, and the Jews lost. And apparently, this boat was used in that rebellion. And when it was on the seashore and it got covered. This boat probably was around when Jesus was around, although Jesus was around about 30 or 40 years before. But this boat has been repaired so many times. They can tell by the different woods that had been used in this boat that it had been repaired. So maybe it was that old, maybe it was there. Doesn't really matter. But it's a boat. It's about, that boat is not as long as, maybe from about me to the wall over there, this black wall. Two-thirds of the screen long, okay? Has no keel. So it's a big canoe. It's not very stable. Okay, has a mast, has a sail, okay, there's a model of it. Has no keel, so it's not very stable. It's a fishing boat, but it's on the Sea of Galilee, okay? And so they follow Jesus in a boat, okay? And they followed him in a boat, which is interesting. Now, who followed him? Well, we know that 6 of the disciples were fishermen. They do boats. They do boats. Now, the word for follow, now you start to be sensitive to the thing. Akoluthao. They're following him from wherever they're at. From wherever they're at. They're coming towards him. They follow Jesus into a boat, and then there's a furious storm. You can follow Jesus. And as you follow him, there's furious storms. In fact, this furious storm was suddenly. Now, where we live in Michigan, we live obviously on the west coast of Lake Michigan. And we can stand on the beach, and I have. And the predominant winds come from the west. And I have seen storms come. I've seen water spouts on the big lake way out there. And I'm telling you, I have never had thunderstorms like I've had since I moved to Michigan. In Ontario, where I lived was not far from the St. Lawrence River, so we had some pretty big humdingers. But I'm telling you, those clouds that come across the plains, empty their water, get refueled over the big water of Lake Michigan, and when they come to Holland, I'm telling you, they are thunder bangers. I've never heard anything like it. Huge, but you could see it coming. You could see it coming. And there are some storms in our life you can see coming. There are some storms that you can see coming, and you're warning your friend. You say, listen, there's a storm coming if you keep going there. There's a storm coming. But then there's some storms that come suddenly, all of a sudden. Heart attack, loss of a job, diagnosis that's not at all what you thought. You see, you can follow Jesus. And just because you follow him doesn't mean there aren't going to be storms. And just because you follow him, some of these storms could catch you off guard. In fact, in this world, he said, you'll have trouble. But take heart. I've overcome the world. It's kind of in our job description. So, here we have it. We have Jesus. We have a boat, which is kind of an overstatement. It's really a canoe. They followed him into the boat, and then there's a furious storm on the lake. Now, it's kind of interesting. It says lake in the text, but really in Greek, it's thalassa. Thalassa is the Greek word for sea. You see, the Sea of Galilee, and this is from the top of our bell. This is a classic photo of the top of our bell. On the Heart of God trip, I had John Lamer. And John Lamer, one time we were taking the boat ride across the sea from Engev to Nofginosar. For those of you who've been there, you'll recognize that. And then John Lamer on the Heart of God trip, he says, "Hey, George." "Yeah, John, what's up, bud?" He says, "Is this the Sea of Galilee?" I says, "Yeah, it is." "Thought it would be bigger." It's a nice sized lake. It's not that big. It's not that big. He's right. It's not right. But, see, here we would call the Sea of Galilee a lake. But look at that map of the Middle East. There are two bodies of water that are large enough, inland bodies of water that show up on the satellite map. One of them is the Sea of Galilee, and the other one's the Dead Sea. Don't know if you realize it. Well, you do realize it, but I'll tell you. The Sea of Galilee is the only freshwater lake in the entire Middle East. I got to tell you, the motif of water and Maim Chaim and living water cannot be overdone. I am telling you. For them, it's a sea. And I have to think, as the Via Maris came down through here, I have to think that as people are making their way to Egypt, the breadbasket of the world, they're coming along and they're meeting people coming up the road, and they say, "Hey, how you doing?" "We're doing bad." I'd say, "I've never met you before." "That's my first trip." "Oh, you've never been to the Galilee?" No. Well, there's a freshwater lake down there. You've got to have Sea of Galilee tilapia. You've got to try it. What is that? It's freshwater fish. You're kidding. There's fish in front. What do you mean? "Oh, no, there's a sea down there, and all the water is sweet." Remember one time I picked up Boaz at the airport. He and his family were coming to visit for a while. We picked him up, and we're coming from O'Hare, and we're going by Gary, Indiana, and coming around the lake at the southern end, and Boaz just couldn't stop saying, "Oh, George, that's all sweet water. That's all sweet water." See, here, there are states that say that land of 10,000 lakes, and I think there's about 13,000 lakes in Michigan. Ontario, where I come from, if you look at a map of Ontario, you think it's sinking because there's so many lakes. For us, water everywhere. In the Middle East, boom, boom. And the one in the south is dead water. So it's a sea. Now, the thing about the Sea of Galilee is, as it is here, the predominant winds are from the west. I hope you appreciate my animations. The predominant winds are from the west. Now, every once in a while, with the west winds, you can have an east wind coming. And that east wind, especially in the north, through a wadi called Gumla, if that wind comes through, those winds collide, and it causes enormous waves. Enormous waves. I've seen 3, 4, I've had people say 5 or 6 footers. The Israelis love it because they pull out their surfboards. Okay? Huge waves. Huge wave. This is just a picture of waves. This is not a picture of the Sea of Galilee. I wish I had it, but I didn't. Okay? But now, this furious storm is called a seismos. Say seismos. Seismos. Now, this is the uniqueness of Matthew. This seismos is where we get the word seismic. And if something is seismic, it relates to earthquakes or vibrations of the earth crust and of the earth's crust. Forgive my misspelling there. Or of enormous proportions or effect. So a seismic wave is not due to wind, it's due to earthquake. A wave that's due to earthquake is a tsunami. I was in India about 10 days after the tsunami hit it a number of years ago. I'd never seen anything like it. The country is full of desperately poor people. We went to where the I think it's Chennai. We went to where that tsunami hit, and it's palm trees that are 30, 35 feet high. You could just see right where, buildings, you could see right where that wave came. So when those disciples were with Jesus in a boat, and the furious storm that came wasn't a furious storm like this, it was a furious storm like that. They had never seen anything like this before. This is seismic. This is absolutely huge. Now, that's interesting. That's really interesting to me. They are terrified. And in my book, they have every right to be. Why? Who brought them in the boat but a carpenter? He's sleeping. Of course he's sleeping. He has no idea the trouble we're in. We're fishermen. We do this. We've never seen anything like this before. Now, that word seismic is an interesting word, because it happens several places in the Gospels, all in Matthew. The word seismos is the word of the earthquake that happened while Jesus was on the cross. The word seismos is the word used at Jesus' resurrection. And the word seismos is used here at the stone. And the storm. It was seismic when he paid for our sins. It was seismic when he defeated death. And what's happening on this lake is seismic. And what's happening at this lake is fear. They're afraid. I'm telling you. Jesus and a boat, a furious storm, a seismic storm, you add them all together, and he's sleeping? He's sleeping? How could he possibly be sleeping? And then he asked the question, why are you so afraid? And that circles me back to Egypt. Because you see, we're not people of fear. We're people of faith. In Egypt, everything is safe. In Egypt, our bank accounts are overflowing. In Egypt, everything's as we think it should be. At the end of the day in Egypt, it's all fear. Because without knowing, we slip into embracing the blessing when we should be embracing the blesser. In the text, God says, I am the Lord your God, who churns up the sea so that its waves roar. The Lord Almighty is his name. I have put my words into your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand. I who set the heavens in place, who laid the foundations of the earth, and who say to Zion, you are my people. I wonder as Jesus was sleeping, could he sleep because he knew that it's his Father who churns up the seas? Was he sleeping there because he understood that? Was he sleeping there because he understood that the Lord had put the words in his mouth? Was he sleeping there because he understood that God was sovereign over all? Why didn't the disciples understand? Why are you so afraid? You are my people. I came for you. I came for you. You know, in the text, about 100, and Jesus gives us about 120, 121 commands. Do you know what command he gives most often? The command he gives most often is not love one another. The command he gives most often is fear not. 21 times. Fear not. Or some derivative of that. Why are you so afraid? Fear not. The next one he says is love one another. When I learned that, I began to appreciate why God put our ancestors in the faith in Egypt. Because our world says when you have all of this, and when you have all of that, and when you have all of this, you're safe. And I found in my life that meant safe, and I don't need God. You know, when our kids mature and they get older, they get independent. It's just opposite with God. As we mature, we get older, we get more dependent. And for us to live in safety is for us to live trusting. But if you're going to live trusting, one of the things you have to deal with is your fears. Because God calls upon us to live in faith with Him, not in fear. And in Matthew's gospel, the word seismic, furious, happens 3 times. At the cross, at the tomb, and with the boat.